So on my last video, I was unboxing a new bike, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I get it set up for a new ride. Everything from the cockpit setup, getting those levers just right, getting that saddle to the right height, getting that suspension dialed in, moving on to the brakes, tire pressure. Stay tuned to the end and let me know if there's anything you guys do different when you're setting up your bike. Now, tools that you're going to need are a shock pump, basic set of Allen wrenches, some sort of a multi-tool. Torque wrench is preferable to be able to get some of those bolts torqued down just right. Also, a phone. Having a phone is going to help you. We'll show you later setting up the suspension to be able to get into those Fox manuals and register your suspension. And then some sort of way to measure. I got a set of calipers I'm using right here, but you could just as easily use a tape measure. Get that back in there. Starting with the bars, when I first built this bike, that's when I go ahead and get the stem on there straight. I use the top of the bars right here, actually the crown of the fork, using this kind of blue caps and staring over the top of the bars right here and kind of tweak it left and right to get it lined up. And then I go ahead and snug down those bolts right there on that stem, get that dialed in. Also, the bar roll. I like when handlebars have a marking to be able to help me line up those bars just right. These handlebars had a marking, but the stem, the front plate on the stem right there, blocked the marking, so I just had to do my best to hold it in place, get that on there, and try and get it not to move to get those bars lined up just right. But then it comes to levers on here. So you want to go ahead and grab a multi-tool, make sure you have the right size to be able to adjust the levers. You want to go ahead and loosen those levers all the way up on both sides. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, now that you got those levers loosened up, you're going to want to try and get them the right distance away from the bars and the right angle tilted down. So distance away from the bars, I like to go ahead and just start with one hand. So I'll start with my right hand for this example. Put it on there, try and get it about where I'd grip it, and you want one finger braking. You can see these levers. I'm going to want my finger not all the way on the tip, but not way back in here as well. So somewhere right about there would be good for the one finger braking. And then as far as it goes with tilting it down, I've kind of gotten to the point to where I can just see that that's the right angle right there, but you really want to be up in your riding stance. So a little bit down, a little bit more. Up in your riding stance and try and get the lever tilted down at just the right angle. And then later when you're bedding in the brakes, you can always make some fine-tune adjustments because you don't want to get out to the trails and have your levers just not set up right. It's going to make braking really uncomfortable. Once you get that dialed in, go ahead. I like to just squeeze in that lever to make sure it's not going to move. And then I go ahead, tighten it down. Now, on brake levers, you can torque them all the way down till they don't move at all. But I like to have mine to where they're just tight enough to where they have a little bit of move. If you really were going to crash, instead of snapping off a brake lever, it's just going to rotate up and rotate around the bars. So keeping those brake levers a little bit loose is a technique. Now when it comes to, put you at a better angle. And then when it comes to the shifter lever, you can see I have it already on this side of the brake lever. You may have to shift it over to the other side just depending on how you want that thing set up. But what I like is I want to be able to reach it, but I don't want it so far over that it's going to hit that thumb, especially when you hit some bigger jumps and your hands will kind of slide down around. If your thumb is jamming against there, it's no good. So that feels about right there. Once again, snugging that thing down. Not too tight, just right there to where if I crash, that thing can rotate and move. All right, now that I have that side dialed in, it's time to get that measuring device. Either set of calipers like I have right here, or you could just as easy use a tape measure, but I'm gonna go ahead and use the calipers since I have it. And I want my brake levers and everything to be identical from left to right, just to give me that symmetrical, is that using the word right? Feeling from left to right. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure right there, that distance. Come over here to this one, needs to go in just a little bit more. Okay, now that I got those the same distance from the bars, now I'm just gonna look like this, do my best to eyeball it. Try and get those levers tilted at about the same angle. And then you're just gonna bring a wrench with you later on when you get to the trail. When you start riding, you may notice that one feels a little bit off. You may have to just loosen it a little bit, tilt it up, crank it back down, but I think that feels good enough for right now. Gonna go ahead and tighten down that lever. Keeping it not too tight. Dropper post lever. So you're gonna wanna go ahead and, actually that feels about right. Once again, getting that dropper post lever to where it's close enough to the bars, but I mean close enough to the grips where your hand's gonna be, but not so far over that it's gonna be running in to that thumb finger when you have your thumb on there and you're moving the bike around and you're riding those gnarlier trails. All right, final little thing, if you have that reach adjustment, so you can see that right there, have that reach adjustment, you can adjust that to get the brake levers about the right distance that you like. And what I like to do on that is I'll go ahead and do a couple clicks at a time. So if I do 2 clicks on the left, 2 clicks on the right, I'll kind of count the clicks to keep those symmetrical left to right. Same amount of clicks, same distance from the bar, getting that same feeling of the brake pull between the front and the rear brake. All right, now it's time to get that saddle to the right height. 2 techniques. First of all, you want to have a slight bend in your knee so you can just hop on the bike, stand up, get the seat post, you know, all the way up and try and get that thing to the right height and then tighten it down. Second technique is you can actually use, if you have 2 bikes, you can use your previous bike, grab a tape measure, go over to that bike and measure from the center of the bottom bracket up to where the saddle sits. Take that distance over to your new bike, measuring up. Looks like I need to come up just a little bit more. Now this isn't going to give you 100% accuracy, but it'll get you close enough, somewhere within the ballpark of the right height. Now I'm going to tighten that down just slightly, hop on the bike, find something to brace myself against, that seat up. That's about good right there. You just want, I like that, I like the way that feels. Slight bend in the knee, and then this is where I like to use a torque wrench. The dropper post lever, you can see right here on mine, it says 7 Newton meters max right there. So I'm going to take my torque wrench, set it to 6, going just slightly less than the max amount, get the right size Allen wrench. Torque that down to 6, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that there's not so much torque or so much pressure around that seat post, that dropper post, that it's not going to function properly. So the next thing you want to do is do a real quick function check. Seems like it's doing good. All right, so now we got our cockpit set up. We got our seat dialed in. Oh, also the angle. Some people like to angle their saddles down. Some people like to keep it a little bit more flat like I have it right now. And then on the rails, you can slide it forward a little bit. I like the way this saddle's set up right now, so I'm not gonna mess with the angle of the saddle, but that's another adjustment. And then moving on, the most critical step, which is setting up the suspension, the shock and the fork right here. Now Fox makes it super easy, and this is where your phone is gonna come in handy. So grabbing that phone, you're gonna look down underneath your shock or find the spot on your shock where you see the little QR code. You're gonna go ahead, grab your camera out, stick it on that QR code, pull up that website, and that's going to allow you to, first of all, register your suspension, and then second of all, get the manual to be able to set up your shock. And then the same thing is going to happen on your fork. You can see that QR code right there. It says scan, remove, and then ride. You're going to go ahead and scan that QR code, get the manual for your shock, the manual for your fork. And what I like to do is I just follow those manuals to a T. I go with the factory recommended settings on my Fox suspension, and then from there take the bike out on a ride. And I find that when it comes to the factory recommended settings for myself, usually I'll need to go maybe down a click, maybe two on the rebound for the rear shock. And I'll need to go down a couple clicks on the compression for the fork, especially when you have a Grip 2 damper like this that's got the high speed and low speed compression. But other than that, the Fox factory recommendations work pretty damn good in my humble opinion. But the one thing you guys can't forget is to write down those settings. So you'll see on my Polygon Siskiu T9 I have down here, I use a note on my phone. So for this, I got the rear shock set to 180 PSI with 7 clicks of rebound, so 7 clicks from fully closed open. I got the fork set to 86 PSI with the high speed compression set to 5 clicks, low speed compression 8 clicks. I got the low speed and high speed rebound numbers right there as well. That way when I get out on the trail, if I want to make any adjustments, I know where I'm starting from, and it's a little bit easier to tune back and forth and get that suspension dialed in just right. And now that we got that suspension set, this bike is pretty much ready to hit the trails and start riding. There's just a couple final things you want to do. First of all, you want to set your tire pressure. Now I always like to run about 2 PSI more in my rear tire. So right now I'm running 24 PSI in the rear and 22 PSI up front for this trail bike, riding on the trails that I'm riding, which is usually a loose over hard pack, but right now it's kind of hero dirt and it's got a lot of rocks in there. So I have to be careful not to run my PSI too low or I'll get those pinch flats. The next thing you want to make sure you get dialed in before you go ride is bedding in those brakes. You want to have your brakes ready for that first downhill descent. The easiest way I found to do this is you should already have all your riding gear on from when you're setting up your suspension. So if I forgot to mention that, have your riding gear on when you set up your suspension. Then take this thing out in front of your house, whether you got a hill would be optimal. If not, just a flat street you got. Do some laps, getting up to speed as fast as you can get the bike. Gently pull on those brakes. You want to slowly stop that bike, but don't come to a complete stop. Just go all the way down to about a walking pace. There's plenty of better videos on this and guys that describe this way better. But basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to transfer some of that brake pad material to the rotors, get those brakes stopping just right before you go out on the trails for that first downhill descent, which I think I already said that, repeated myself. Hopefully you guys gained something from this video. Leave a comment below, let me know what you guys do to set up your bike. Is there anything I missed? Is there anything that you guys do differently? And definitely subscribe and tune into that next video I got where I'm gonna be taking this bike on the ultimate beatdown test, and you guys will never guess where I'm heading to. Everstoke with Brian, BKXC, and Aaron from MTB and Adventures.